Welcome back, everyone, to the Word and Journey podcast. Stories that shape us and make us think, and really make us think and wrestle with the forces of good and evil on a cosmic scale. Sometimes. Anyway, I am back here in the studio with Rousseau Brassier from Southern Oregon. Rousseau, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Urindy Maleldo, always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, I'm glad we could be here. Yes. Speak of me always to Maleldo, as I will always for you.
Yes. And greet your king and mother for me as well.
Right. Well, actually, you live closer to my mother than I do, but anyway. But I will intercede to the Theotokos. Anyway. Yes. And so for all of those nerds out there, you might know from that little bit. So we are reading C.S. Lewis still and again and ever and after always. We are working our way through the Ransom Trilogy. We'll call it that now. And today we'll be talking about Book 2, Perelandra. There will be spoilers. So if you haven't read it, you just should have done that by now.
Absolutely. Quit wasting your life. Whatever other priorities you have, scrap them and get your nose into this book.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I turned off the AI. I can't. I can't. I'll take notes. Okay. So this is not being transcribed by AI, which is better. Anyway, so we would love to talk about the book. Very quickly though, because I want to be sure I leave time for it. Rousseau, how are things with the Quester?
Oh wow, it's been a wonderful journey. The Quester community is a nonprofit for kids where we take kids on a big worldview formation journey, encouraging them and cultivating curiosity about life's biggest questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What's the meaning of life? How do we know right from wrong? And what's my destiny beyond this lifetime? And it's been really an amazing and wild ride. It's I'm very, very grateful. Get to spend time with kids and start filming some new projects.
Cool. You
check us. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah, I was gonna say, feel free to check it out on YouTube. YouTube, just The Quester, and we'll pop up.
Yep. I was gonna say, you sound like you said that a few times before, but
only a few hundred.
Yeah. So, and is it centered around like bringing scripture to life, or more like a theological orientation, or?
Well, we started with philosophical questions so that we could cast a wide net so kids inside or outside of church background could approach these big questions and then find their way into scripture. So that's where we're heading now through the story of scripture.
Okay, cool. Yes, it's a really great resource for anybody who would like to acquaint their kids with the scriptures, with the Christian worldview, and just begin to orient them toward answering questions in that way from that source. So there's some great materials, great illustrations, really wonderful people involved. Y'all should check it out.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm inspired. Okay, well, back to our story. So, I'd be curious because I know I've been eking away at this one in little bits over the last month, and I guess you said you binged it over the weekend, so that's amazing.
It's my 5th time through. I love these books. I live in them. I see myself as an old solar now, and so I just I really, my whole worldview has been re-enchanted by these books and how they're just incredible. So to binge it in a weekend was fantastic.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Would you care to offer a narration or a slightly expanded summary of just the story component? What happens in the story? And then we'll analyze it.
Yeah, sure. So this is, as you said, part 2 of Ransom's journey. First, he traveled to Malacandra, also known as Mars, and learned Old Solar, which is the language that they speak on that planet. And then this time he is carried by an Eldila, actually by the Archon, the Oyarsa of Malacandra, to Venus. One of the other names for the book Perelandra is Voyage to Venus. I think that's what the Americans called it when they tried to market it, but its proper name is Perelandra. And so he travels there not knowing what his assignment will be. He doesn't know what he's going there for. And he first encounters a dragon and thinks maybe this beast is the creature I'm supposed to meet with. It turns out just to be a regular dragon lizardy creature, and he ends up meeting a woman. By the way, Lewis paints this incredibly vivid story of how the entire world of Venus is covered in water, and instead of fixed lands, the what you walk on are basically these giant floating lily pads, or these. How would you describe them, Reese?
Floating islands, but they're not solid. They'll flex and adjust the shape of the waves.
Yeah. So unlike walking on like a ship where the deck is always firm, whatever the waves do, you're walking on literally like walking on water is what it feels like. And so he learns to walk over the first day. And as I was listening to it, I was looking at the mountains in my valley here in Rogue Valley and just thinking like, wow, what if those were waves just rolling towards me? And I had to learn to like walk as they, flex beneath me. So anyways, that's a little geographical detail. He ends up running into Weston, who comes out of deep heaven in the same ship that he took to Malacandra. And Weston comes as one who's kind of had an adjustment in his worldview. He no longer thinks of the world as totally just materialistic and naturalistically. He actually has become quite a spiritually minded person, and calls that spiritual life force into himself entirely, not knowing that there are spirits and spirits, good and evil, and consequently is possessed by a devil, whether it's the devil or just a lower demon, we don't know. But he becomes the tempter for the woman on Venus. And there's a woman who is the mother of, she's like the Eve character. And she is in this battle between good and evil. Ransom trying to persuade her not to break the one command that Maleldil has given for her not to sleep on the fixed land. There's one fixed island, and she's not allowed to sleep on it. And Weston is trying to convince her to sleep on it and break that command. All the while, she's looking for the king, who's the Adam figure, the father of the world. And she's always referencing what would the king think, and what would Maleldil have me do? But there's definitely a good and evil conflict, as you said, between these characters. I'm gonna pass it over to you to take it over because I'm buzzing a little too much. What do you think?
Okay.
Pick it up on the narration.
Yeah. I mean that's the core of the premise is we're set on Perelandra, where everything is huge and everything is delicious and everything is just, it's new. It's an uncorrupted, untainted world. And I would say, as far as like world building, I would say Lewis was at the top of the game on this one. Like, I mean, Malacandra was cool, but like I could feel myself in Perelandra. This was really wonderful. And Ransom gets dropped into kind of a Genesis chapter 3 sort of scenario where there's the king and the queen, and there's an uncorrupted world. There's a tempter. And Ransom gets to take the role of the guardian, the ally, to help walk the lady through that, and to try to defend the world. And then the focus of the story shifts from this triangulation between Weston, Ransom, and the lady to the struggle more directly between Ransom and Weston, and then that will play out. And again, spoilers. Ransom wins, and the world remains uncorrupted. And kind of where it ends, if we can, we'll try to hit on this idea of like enthronement a little bit. But there's a way where the king and queen are reunited, and they begin a new chapter of life on Perelandra, a new chapter of what Maleldil had planned for them, and they'll compare and contrast it as to what happened on Thulkandra, which is our world. There was the fall, which led to the incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection, the gloriousness of Christ defeating death by death, and that salvation, which this is still Bright Week, so Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Indeed. No, wait, technically Bright Weekend of last night. Anyway, Christ is still risen. It's the Paschal season. But anyway, so they'll reference that as a wonderful thing that happened. But then they'll say, well, a different wonderful thing is happening here because we avoided all that. So, that, yes.
And one of the temptations that Weston brings to the woman all the time is, if you break this one command, think about even, he says, Ransom can't deny that in his world, a wonderful thing happened because they chose to break the command. And Ransom's defense is, well, yes, God, Maleldo always makes good of evil, but the loss was real. We have never seen our mother or our father, who the lady is always telling him to greet, because she just assumes, she doesn't know anything of death by experience. So she just assumes our world being populated, that we live in this harmonious love, not knowing that, yeah, evil and death have plagued our world, and what even evil is. And so it's just really interesting how Weston, who becomes the unman as he's possessed by a devil, makes these arguments that are so compelling. He's like, well, Maleldo made so much good of the evil that happened, so you should also reenact evil and taste it yourself. It's, sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's jump into that a little bit, because so one of the themes we observe here is this idea of possession, how we interact with the supernatural world and everything. So Russo, what are you observing in just what happens with Weston and the bent ones?
Yeah, I think the description that is given of Weston at the very beginning is so compelling. It talks about him as, let me find the page real quick. Oh, here it is. Professor Weston was a man obsessed with the idea, which is at this moment circulating all over our planet, to open a new chapter of misery for the universe. It is the idea that humanity, having now sufficiently corrupted the planet where it arose, must at all costs contrive to seed itself over a larger area, that the vast astronomical distances, which are God's quarantine regulations, must somehow be overcome. This for a start. But beyond this lies the sweet poison, the false infinite, the wild dream that planet after planet, system after system, in the end, galaxy after galaxy, can be forced to sustain everywhere and forever the sort of life which is contained in the loins of our own species. A dream begotten by the hatred of death upon the fear of true immortality, fondled in secret by thousands of ignorant men and hundreds who are not ignorant. The destruction or enslavement of the other species in the universe, if such there are, is to these minds a welcome corollary. In Professor Weston, the power had at last met the dream. So the description of him as one who's just out to spread human life over the universe is really who he was in Malacandra. But then when Ransom meets him again, he says it's not about human life necessarily. It's about life itself and the life force and the spiritual immaterial life which is behind all of that. And he says, we agree. This is maybe who you would call the Holy Spirit. And Ransom says, that's not at all what we mean by the Holy Spirit. And he says, there you go again. I start talking about spirituality and you throw it in my face. And all the while, Weston is trying to put words in Ransom's mouth and get him to agree that anything and everything which is pure spirit is good. And Ransom says, no, we don't worship Maleldo because he's spirit. We worship him because he's good and faithful and trustworthy. And so Weston says, no, I'm worshiping the true spiritual life force. You call him, God, I call him whatever, and I call that life force into myself entirely. And at that moment, he begins convulsing and is demonically possessed. Ransom goes to grab, it's such a vivid picture, grab the bottle of brandy, puts it in Weston's mouth for him to maybe take a sip and revive and wake up. He thinks he's having an epileptic fit, and Weston bites down on the bottleneck and shards of glass go into his mouth and don't come back out. And it's just this gruesome, really visceral description of possession. And then from that, the consciousness that comes from Weston is no longer his own for the most part. You get glimpses of him coming back, but he has called and invited a spiritual force into himself that he worships and has total allegiance to. And it is, let's just say, that doesn't go well for him.
It doesn't go well for him, and I will say too, it's creepy. Like I wouldn't at all classify this as a horror novel, like by any stretch. But there is a horrifying element to this, as you see this dismantling of a human and this desecration of an icon, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, I mean, this is again something I think Lewis really did well, and in describing Weston under the influence of this dark
Mm-hmm.
spirit. Like there's just like there's the form, there's the flesh of a human, but there's not a soul, there's not the light, there's no connection there. And
Mm-hmm.
like I think like that there's this one point in the story where the unman has been talking to the lady all day, and now it's night, she's asleep, Ransom's falling asleep, and the unman's just like, ransom, ransom,
Oh,
ransom,
dude.
ransom.
Yeah, that description of evil being not we think of evil as being so like intelligent, but he talks about it being like a bad child who just is just pestering him over and over. Yeah, that's one of my
Mhm.
favorite parts. And me and my friends, we always do that to each other. We'll see each other and just go ransom, 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 and just
Oh
mess
my
with each
goodness.
other.
Yeah, yeah. It's very
And
cool.
whenever Ransom says, what do you want? He says, nothing. And so it'll happen like 1,000 times. And he just talks about the cruelty and he's like, I was ready to face some like evil spirit that had,
Mhm.
possessed a man, but I wasn't ready for this cruel evil that just is like annoying more than anything. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
really weird.
yeah.
Reminds me of the brothers Karamazov when Ivan meets a devil in his dream. It's anyways, yeah, different
Yeah.
book, different time. Yeah.
Coming soon to a podcast near you. Sometime. I mean, it's interesting thinking about like, so I mean, what is evil? What is horrifying, and especially like depicted in literature.
Mhm.
A friend and I mean, and these are posted, but we read The Case of Dorian Gray, and then we watched a movie version of it, and we're comparing and contrasting like what's really horrible in it, and like, and in the movie, it ended up being like they made the picture like kind of like alive and like oozing worms and like making sounds, and like I think trying to like overplay like the horribleness of it.
Mhm.
And it just ended up being like kind of like, yeah, I guess okay, it's a little bit gross, but it's like a little, you can
Mhm.
kind of tell it's like over dramatic.
Mhm.
Whereas like I was trying to emphasize like uh in the way the book the way the book ends, again, spoilers. but
Mhm.
but like there's this way where Dorian like stabs the painting and doesn't have any idea what's going to happen, and he's just
Mhm.
like he's like made this painting like this reverse icon of himself, and then like
Mhm.
is caught completely off guard by his own death. And it was just like, I think that's like the horrifying part, and the part
Mhm.
that's meant to like jar us. It doesn't need to be visually graphic. There's these
Mhm.
concepts where if we wrestle with them, they're really 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 terrifying. But
Mhm.
but back to this story.
Yeah.
So I'm noting the way that Weston, yeah, he has a worldview change. He gains some insight. He gains some
Mhm.
knowledge. He comes to believe. And here I'm
Mhm.
thinking about how St. James would say, you believe? You do well. Even the demons believe, and they don't tremble. And
Mhm.
there's other saints that will talk about how like the demons will even imitate virtues. They'll be like, well,
Mhm.
you fast, well, the demons don't eat. You hold
Mhm.
vigil at night, well, the demons don't sleep.
Mhm.
Things and things. And they'll be like, the only thing a demon can't imitate is humility.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
and Weston definitely doesn't have any humility,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's just interesting. At one point, when he says, "I was perhaps mistaken on this," basically he's recanting his materialistic, atheistic worldview, and Ransom like feels like laughing at him, but he goes, "This might be the first." He thinks internally, "This might be the first time he's ever admitted to being wrong." And even if it was 99% out of hubris to hold this prideful, he's like, "It's not my place to rebuff him. I'm gonna let him, let his,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
yeah,
mistaken, just stand." And
yeah. But there's an interesting thing to consider in like what happened, what happens around the fall. So
mm,
we could say, and the church fathers will teach this, that so our mother and father, Adam and Eve, and they were commanded not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Um, and the belief of the church fathers is that at some point they would have, and it would
mm,
have been good because they
mhm,
would have matured and been ready for it.
mhm,
And there's a similar way where, again, peeking ahead to the end of Perelandra,
mhm.
at some point, like the king and queen are enthroned on the fixed lands,
Yeah.
and presumably now that is okay for them, whereas before it
Mhm.
wasn't. But it
Yeah.
had to do with this maturing,
Yeah.
and you almost see. inversion of that going on with Weston, where
Mm-hmm.
now he sees, oh yeah, the spiritual world, it is out there, but
Hmm.
she's not spiritually mature enough to be able to handle it. And
Mm-hmm.
so again, he has no idea what he's messing with.
Yeah,
He doesn't have any guidance, and so
totally.
succumbs to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a foreshadowing of what's going to happen in That Hideous Strength, where these scientific geniuses are celebrating all of their vast discoveries, and they bow down to worship science, not knowing that they're actually partnering with spirits and devils as well. And yeah. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, but it's like, Frankenstein is the same way. It's like every monster movie, AI movie,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I know there's a lot of people that are interested to see what will happen as we in our day experiment with AI. And I'm just like, have you not seen Skynet? So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
um,
It, oh, sorry. It's interesting to me that he didn't start the second book in the Ransom trilogy. Actually, was originally going to be called The Dark Tower, and somebody found this manuscript unfinished in the burn pile at his house. And The Dark Tower is it's an incomplete manuscript, but it's part 2 in the Ransom trilogy. And it's about them looking through this chronoscope at a different parallel world, where they're not traveling through space. And long story short, that story got scrapped. And I just think that's really interesting that C.S. Lewis, a brilliant genius of a man, started a story and started the second Ransom book and then scrapped it. And I believe it was because he was asked to write the introduction to Paradise Lost, right around the time where he was midway through The Dark Tower. And I think he was inspired by Paradise Lost, to shift from this Ransom story that took place on Earth to go, wait, what if there was a world in which paradise was not lost? And so I think he took Paradise Lost, which he loved. He's always quoting Milton, even throughout the Ransom trilogy, and turned it into a story where humanity doesn't fall. And so very fascinating. Just a little side tangent about Lewis being willing to scrap a story and change directions.
Yep. That's as a writer, that's brilliantly difficult. So good on you, Jack. So okay. So shifting theme a little bit. So be curious to look at the Last Temptation of the Lady is kind of the centerpiece. Well, one of the centerpieces. I think the other one would be like Ransom's own inner struggle, but we'll hopefully get to that next. Russo, what are you? So as you observe how the unman approaches the lady and how the argument gets framed, what are some things that you observe that we can profitably reflect on?
It's so interesting that he starts by using arguments to the lady, arguments such as, well, they chose to disobey on this world, and look at all the good that came out of it. And she rebuffs all of that. But then Ransom wakes up, and Ransom by this time is just exhausted. He's been defending the truth, and like you said, standing as a guardian for day and week, and he keeps saying to himself, this can't go on, but he comes to find that Weston, or rather not Weston, but the unman, who's now been completely possessed by this evil spirit, is no longer using arguments. He's using stories. He uses fantasy narratives to describe all of these great women in history who have made such great sacrifices. And he starts painting an image of herself in her mind and in her imagination to say, you could be like one of these heroines. You could be one who makes the great sacrifice, even of your own life and all of the good, and bring in this evil, bring in this death, and think of all the good that will come of it. And he starts, really just using fantasy and imagination and narrative stories to start to twist and bend her will a little bit, or at least get her thinking outside of the, oh no, we don't do it because Malelva would not want us to, and the king would not want me to, so why would I ever do it? And he starts painting this tragic heroine image of herself, and that's when, and so what do you think about the role of both fantasy and story, and how narratives can really shape our perception of reality?
Yeah, narratives, I think, end up being more powerful than facts and dogmas, because they get in really deep. And so, we observe, a lot of Jesus's teachings are through story, through parable. And I think the way like a lot of oral tradition works, and maybe some of its staying power, is in that you've got all of these truths compressed into stories. And there's whether it's parables, Aesop fables, even a lot of fairy tales. So, the reason that they are so powerful is because these great universal spiritual truths get packed into it, kind of hidden in the symbolism. Let the listener check out The Symbolic World by Jonathan Pajot for more of that. But I am but a student. But yes, I mean, story is really powerful. It's like this the exchanging of stories. I mean, it activates. I mean, there's this intellectual component because there's a data attached to it, but there's this emotional relationship component that like engages like the other part of the brain. So we have to be careful with stories. And there's those who say, here's why a Christian should be involved in storytelling, because we need to be in this world. But also, I mean, for us who are consuming stories, I mean, it's something to be really, really careful of. So with fantasy, here's how this is going. So there is this idea. The young man's telling this lady, here's all of these other women, kind of like, thinking, hey, like there's this comparison game, be like them. I'll read a little bit of a section for when they're talking about it. So it's the unman, the lady, and ransom. I am wondering, said the woman's voice. I think they're talking at night. Whether all the people of your world have the habit of talking about the same thing more than once. I have said already that we are forbidden to dwell on the fixed land. Why do you not either talk of something else or stop talking? I mean, great question. Because this forbidding is such a strange one, said the man's voice, and so unlike the ways of Melildan in my world. And he has not forbidden you to think about dwelling on the fixed land. That would be a strange thing, to think about what will never happen. Nay, in our world, we do it all the time. We put words together to mean things that have never happened, and places that never were. Beautiful words, well put together, and then tell them to one another. We call it stories or poetry. In that old world you spoke of, Malacandra, they did the same. It is for mirth and wonder and wisdom. But what is the wisdom in it? Because the world is made up not only of what is, but of what might be. Melildan knows both and wants us to know both. And this is more than I ever thought of. The other, Ransom, has already told me things which made me feel like a tree whose branches were growing wider and wider apart. But this goes beyond all, stepping out of what is into what might be, and talking, making things out there, alongside the world. I will ask the king what he thinks of it. You see, that is what we always come back to. If only you had not been parted from the king. Oh, I see. That also is one of the things that might be. The world might be, so that the king and I were never parted. So what I really grabbed onto here is this idea of comparing what is versus what might be, which is essentially fantasy. And it's true. I mean, us who like creativity, I mean, we live in the world of like imagination, creating worlds, which is fun. And that is a good and beautiful thing when we are using these imaginative methods to talk about something that is true, which happens in story all the time. But there's a dark element to this where it's creating a lie, and it's creating an unreality. And and here I'm talking also from the perspective of addiction and recovery, which is my professional world, also my personal story. As I'm in my own recovery process, and a major part of that is this refusal to just be in reality as it is. Like, I don't want to feel the feelings I'm feeling. I don't want to live in the world that I'm living in. I don't want my reality, my responsibilities, my defects to be what they are. So I will tell myself some other story, maybe under the influence of alcohol, pornography, too much work, various other things. But this, the temptation here, the tantalizing bait in the trap is this idea of like, you can control your own reality, at least in your own mind. You don't have to be present with what is. And and it's a thing that catches millions of people in its grip. Obviously, there's the people who we see, using lots of drugs, actively abusing pornography, things like that. But there's a lot of subtler ways to do it too. I'm a parent. Like, I want my kid to be this like star athlete or the super good student. Yeah, I want this kid to be. I'm thinking of what this kid might be, so that I feel better about them, instead of really looking at, well, who are they actually, and what are their actual struggles, and things like that. So
it's interesting you talked about
Right.
when you said alcohol, pornography, overwork, I just was like, oh my gosh, the easy one I vices to identify were like, pornography or alcohol, and then you're like overwork, and I was like, oh, arrow to the heart. Wow, that is a way of creating a fantasy world where my worth or my anything is dependent on what I do. Sorry, I interrupted. I was so enjoying what you're saying.
Thanks, but thanks for joining me in my human experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, but we lose a lot when we disconnect ourselves from reality. We miss out on really encountering God in the inner stillness, and we gain so much by facing reality as it is at all costs, and by taking inventory of ourselves. And lots of traditions have some sort of take a moral inventory, or go to confession, or just confess your sins one to another. So here we see this really in this really pronounced format where it's part of how the dark forces are trying to corrupt this other world by trying to tear them away from what the good that is to this mythical better that might be out there.
It's really interesting as well how throughout the book, the woman's deference to the king, her husband, is just so pronounced. She just loves him and in many ways venerates him. She just trusts him implicitly and would never want to do anything that he wouldn't want. And in an unfallen world where that kind of submissive love is untainted by the abuse of power or anything, it's really beautiful to hear that ideal portrayed through the woman. But then in Weston, the unman's story painting and fantasy world, it says this: all the time, as a sort of background to these goddess shapes, the speaker was building up a picture of the other sex, males. No word was directly spoken on the subject, but one felt them as a huge, dim multitude of creatures, pitifully childless. I'm going to start from the top. Sorry. Is that okay? Are we able to cut it? Okay. Yeah. And all the time, as a sort of background to these goddess shapes, the speaker was building up a picture of the other sex. No word was directly spoken on the subject, but one felt them as a huge, dim multitude of creatures, pitifully childish and complacently arrogant, timid, meticulous, unoriginating, sluggish, and ox-like, rooted to the earth in their indolence, prepared to try nothing, to risk nothing, to make no exertion, and capable of being raised into full life only by the unthanked and rebellious virtue of their females. That was like, oh my gosh, that actually does describe me and a great deal of mankind. I don't know. That was just interesting how, as he paints the heroic woman who steps out into the unthanked virtue of rebellion, he's painting, oh yeah, the men will never, the king will never do this. You have to do it. You have to take the initiative in rebelling against Maleldil, which is what Maleldil secretly wants of you as well, so that you can really be your own. It's interesting.
That is super interesting. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Like the sense of where he's like, yeah, Maleldil wants you to do this thing, but he's not going to tell you he wants to. In fact, he's going to tell you the opposite. It's like classic gaslighting and just manipulation, and just this, there's text, there's subtext, there's these assumptions. It's I don't know. It's describing a very toxic family system, and I know some of us come from systems like that. So I'm so sorry. Lord have mercy. there is healing from that. But yeah, that's amazing.
One other very interesting note is how in this world, Ransom shows up completely naked, and the woman is also naked. So there's this naked and unashamed aspect to the story. And then when Weston comes, he sees them both naked and thinks that Ransom is seducing her. And he says, "What? No, like it hadn't crossed my mind." And Weston can't imagine, a world where sex isn't at the center of everything. And he says, "Well, you wouldn't think a man crazy who goes to Niagara Falls and doesn't immediately think of turning the water into cups of tea. There's so much more beauty and goodness and life and love and enjoyment in this world in its untainted form, that the last thing he's thinking about is sex." And so he uses the word transsexual, not in the way that it's used in our culture, but he's transsexual as in an experience of the world that is so sensuous and pleasurable. Even he talks about the fruits he eats being orgiastic and opening up new genuses of pleasure. And so everything in the world is so enjoyable and good that he's not even thinking about sex because he's overwhelmed with the goodness. And I think that's really incredible how, most of us think, oh, like if in the world to come, if there isn't sexual pleasure, like well, how good can it really be? Because that is among the great pleasures of this life and this age. But I love how he shows, no, there is a world in which sex is, it is to, a child. In another book he writes, a child who hears about sex says, "Well, will there be chocolate involved?" the adult who's experienced sex goes like, "No, like it's so much better than that." But a child who hasn't, like you said, matured into being able to experience the beauty and goodness of sex can only think, well, if there's not chocolate involved, it can't really be that good. Now, of course, there could be chocolate involved, but that's the podcast.
Indeed. It's reminding me of how elsewhere Lewis says, and someone will have to let me know where because I can't remember, but he'll talk about how the problem is not that we have desired too much, but we've desired too little. And the idea is kind of taking the more transcendent view of things, of recognizing like the true pleasure is in God, and like that is the true thing, and everything else we could desire is less than that. And and this is something that gets talked about a lot in Orthodox thought also is people are created with a capacity for infinite desire, and that can only be satisfied by an infinite source, and and only God is like that. And so
that's in a reflection on the Psalms, by the way. Reflections on the Psalms. He's talking about the fair beauty of the Lord. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Everyone should read that too. But there's this way we could think. One of my favorite authors, Andrew Williams. He wrote this book from Object to Icon, talking about how he talks about like the pornification of the world. Talks a little bit about pornography, more about how we misuse desire. All desire is good and meant to point us toward God. When desire is pointed towards something less, or like other lesser things get over desired, I mean, that's where all of the problems come in. Anyway, yes.
Maybe in our last 15 minutes, we can talk about how Ransom overcomes the evil one, the Tempter, and what the I was going to say what the ending of their world is, but rather it's really just the beginning. So tell us, how does Ransom face such a maleficent evil? What could he, a mere mortal man, do against a power that has lived ages and is now possessing Weston's body?
You can put him in a cave, and then put that cave in another cave, and then come to his face and smash it with a rock. Okay, well,
First New Groove quotes are my favorite. Or to save on postage.
Right. Lava. Okay. So there is that part where there's the smashing of the face with the rock, but that's like the very, very, very end. It's this very long thing. What I love about this is so this whole process, it starts with this very like heady intellectual, like it's like two university scholars at their peak, just like arguing back and forth. And this is also why I'm like, and that's why a debate never cured anybody or converted anybody. But
we need to get violent with it,
right? Yeah. But so then Ransom he goes through kind of a version of Dark Knight of Despair, where he gets into himself and he is just like, this can't go on, this can't go on, this can't go on, and feeling very hopeless. And I'm not going to read quotes from this because it happens over a long time, but he basically he comes to an inner point of surrender where he's able to see himself in Maleldil's plan and see it's like basically like Maleldil's got this. I just have to do what's right in front of me, and there is a point in the future at which it will be done, and the good will come of it. And he's maybe kind of recognizing, okay, so maybe we'll play out like in our world and how bad things happen, but then good came of it. God is good. God is in control. Here's this unman, and I'm supposed to get him to stop tempting the lady, and I'll do my best, but at some point the situation's over either way, and at some point Melilda wins, and he's able to bring it down to, he figures out what his course of action is going to be, and it ends up being like, well, I have to kill Weston,
Weston's body, because Weston's already dead, basically.
Yeah. So it comes down to this, like, well, and here's where I've lately been steeped in like 12-step literature and wisdom and reading, and so their third step is very much about turning one's will over to the higher power and surrender, and it's really built into that tradition, this idea of one day at a time, do the next right thing, just like what's right in front of you. And Ransom comes to a point like that where he's like, well, this is my one thing right in front of me. I've got this Weston's body unmanned to dispatch, and that's what I'm going to do, and that's all I'm going to worry about. And then Malilda's got the rest. And in that space, in that surrendered space, is where he finds incredible strength and resolve, which then carries him through a whole marvelous adventure. But I was just like, of course, surrender wins the day. The inner stillness wins the day. Again.
So he walks up on Weston, who is sitting there ripping a bird apart, which throughout the book, every time Weston's body gets alone, he's just ripping apart frogs with his sharp nails, like ripping them down their spine, tearing feathers off of birds, just a wicked little kid, basically, just polluting and vandalizing this good world. And when he walks up to him, he is, fully surrendered, but then also realizes Malelda has sent me here. And the only thing I can do is actually put an end to this evil body and stop this evil body from being spreading its evil anymore. So he punches him in the face, and he expects that that Weston's body is going to have some supernatural strength, and that even catching his hands will be like trying to catch the propellers of an airplane. And he finds that it's actually just one middle-aged scholar against another. Weston's body is a lot fatter and doesn't take punishment as well. Ransom is not quite as strong, but he's in a lot better shape from being a walker. And so they go to physical combat, and every time Ransom is raining blows and punches around his kidneys and face, Weston is just shredding Ransom's body. Weston's body is using his nails and teeth to just tear into Ransom, and it's this really disgusting, bloody scene where Weston's tearing Ransom apart, and Ransom is just beating the living life out of this already dead corpse that's been animated by an evil spirit. And then at times Weston will come back into consciousness and go, Ransom, it's me, Weston. And he's like, is this an evil trick, or is this really Weston? Is Weston really back? And he goes, it's terrible down there. It's all darkness and stink. They've pulled me down. Don't let him get me again, Ransom. And Ransom gets confused on a number of times. And it's just one of these things where you don't even know as the reader, is this the evil spirit doing a trick and using deception and using Weston's body or is it Weston's consciousness surfacing from this hellish suppression that's been handed over to the evil one?
Yeah. And there's a way where Weston kind of goes full Denethor in this one too, where he's like, I've encountered the spiritual forces. It's all real. And it sucks, and doom and despair, and you're all gonna die, and burn everything down. So it, which again, it's that combination of insight without wisdom, insight without relationship with God, and it's just insight for insight's sake is really destructive. But I know I really appreciated that because it's like, two middle-aged Oxford scholars that are just like duking it out, and something about that is just a little charming. And there needs to be a good kind of whimsical soundtrack to go with that. But I was reading that, and there's a part of me that usually cringes around something like this because, if we critique toxic masculinity in a lot of literature, that there's a lot of stories, our superhero stories, where the good guy wins because he can throw the hardest punch. I mean, this was my major critique against, like, the first Black Panther movie, because it was like really wonderful movie in so many ways, did many really wonderful things, did nothing to elevate like male characters in literature, because it's like, here's these really smart, intelligent, sophisticated, classy guys, and they just, it becomes a slugfest, boring, and also whatever. But
Yeah.
and so here that's happening again. It comes down to the punch. I think why this feels more palatable for me, though, is because like that I see that's not really the real battle, at least not for Ransom. For Ransom, it's an inner struggle. He has to go through this whole long internal process first, where he comes into himself. He comes to peace with God. He surrenders himself to the process, and like that's where his real work happens. Like after that, everything is just like process after that for him, in the way that it's centered. And again, I feel like that's a lot more true for us in our real life. I mean, most of us are not going to go like punch out our enemies.
Right.
I mean, we're not supposed to do that in Christendom anyway. But all of
different rules on different planets, apparently.
Apparently so, yeah. But all of us will face temptation, and all of us have our thoughts to battle, and all of us will be afflicted by demons, every day of our lives to corrupt ourselves. And so this idea, like, I have to labor and struggle inwardly every day, like, is really relatable and really powerful and really necessary.
Yeah, definitely. So they get dragged down through the waters into this dark cave, and the ocean carries them in an undercurrent into a cave where there is no light. And Ransom puts his hands on Weston's body's throat, and he counts to 1,000 and strangles him to death. And he sits there waiting for the morning to come, not knowing that he's in a cave. Eventually, he crawls out of the cave, but all along, Weston's body has been following him in the dark. And that's when he finally takes this big stone and says, "In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, here it goes. I mean, amen." Bam! Throws the stone into his face, and then crushes his face, and then disposes of his body into a fire pit nearby. And then you look at the imagery, because a moment later he realizes he's bleeding from his heel, and of course we have the serpent whose head has been crushed, and the Son of Man whose heel has been wounded by the serpent creature. And it's just this wonderful, wink at Genesis 3:15, and that story repeating itself, but in a different way on a different planet, without it being Maleldo himself who's come in the body to destroy the unman and crush his head. He uses an ordinary person who's surrendered to his will, who's wrestled with his own fears and overcome to be the force that overcomes evil with good in the long run. So it's pretty rad.
That I really love that imagery. And I kind of like the non-sexy aspect of it too, like, and some just this dude who is maybe not really photogenic and everything, and just this ordinary guy who was willing, became willing. I mean, it wasn't even his idea to go on the first adventure, and then life happened, and he opened himself up to it.
Yeah, he was following true to his word to help an old lady find her mentally handicapped son. And in that course of action, he gets caught up into this cosmic adventure. And it's fun to me to think of, like, in the ordinary course of events that my life consists of, there are moments where God's divine plan for the entire cosmos is being unfolded. And I am in some way playing a small role in that. And maybe some days not so small of a role in that, but I won't ever see it. It's just interesting.
It is. Yeah. Okay.
Should we talk about the enthronement?
Let's talk about enthronement. Yeah. A couple notes about enthronement. So I am again, so I'm pulling some threads in from some of my favorite Bible teachers, but
Mm-hmm.
so there's this note where in the Genesis story, so when God is initially making promises to Abraham, he's at one point he's saying, and your descendants will be like as many as the sand. At another point he's saying, and your descendants will be like the stars.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a reference to quantity as much as quality. Stars image the angelic beings, the angelic powers, and he's talking about how your descendants will become like the angels and begin
Mm-hmm.
to displace the dark powers and participate in the works of God
Mm-hmm.
as the angels do, which as we in the Orthodox Church understand salvation, theosis, like what's up with saints, it's very much like that. It's like we're saved in a very active way to actively participate with God in His works, and then Lives of the Saints are a really fun exploration of that. And there's some really fun imagery where again, so the end of Perelandra, um, they pass their test.
Mm-hmm.
They follow Melil's commands. They resist the temptation.
That's Torah and Tenedril, the man and woman,
Yeah,
the first of his human creations in Perelandra, Torah and
yeah,
Tenedril.
yeah. And so then, and now they come of age. Now they are ready for all of that, and so they enter this new era, this new beginning of a new world. And the imagery is them being enthroned, like not like golden thrones, but like they're brought to a fixed land.
Yeah.
All of the animals assemble. There's a ceremony, like the Oyarsa from
Malacandra.
shows up, and so Malacandra, Perelandra, those Eldil are there.
Yeah,
And
the archetypical male and female genders, in which you see in these two characters. Sorry to jump in there. It was like they are masculinity and femininity at their purest, rawest form, and like the spiritual embodiment of masculinity and femininity. Mars and Venus, Malacandra and Perelandra, raising Tor and Tenedril to these places of regal splendor and setting them out. And what's amazing is these creatures that are so much wiser and older love putting themselves in subjection to Tor and Tenedril. They're like, this is what we've been waiting for, is for you to rise up so that we can be your servants. And we don't know anything of that kind of humility by experience other than in the life of Christ and as we see it. But it's just amazing to see this world in which the angels become lower than the humans, which is what Psalm 8 says. Yet you have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings, mankind, but you've crowned him with glory and honor. And in the end, there's a role reversal where we judge the angels and we, are raised, and they love that. They are our guardians until that time of maturing comes, and we see it come here at Perelandra.
But that's exactly it. Is like Lewis is exploring, well, what if it happened in like the most ideal, what if it happened in the way it was supposed to, where there isn't a fall, the children grow up in peace, and then take the role above the angels in that way. And so Tor and Tenedril, they're the kind of a depiction or an exploration of what that could have been. But the reality is, that didn't happen in Perelandra. Things happen differently, but that's still the reality, is that we who are the humans, we who are the image of God, we are that pinnacle of creation, and our spiritual coming of age comes through Christ, so being baptized into his death, his resurrection, partaking of him. We become like him, and in that way we surpass the angels, and begins to participate with God in his works. And
he's always intended to rule the cosmos through human representatives from the very beginning. He loves to delegate his authority. He could have easily spread the garden and his image throughout the world, but he uses his icon, humanity, to do it. And then when we become corrupted through the fall, he sends the true icon, the image of himself, Christ, who is the image of the invisible God, the exact imprint of his resplendent, glorious nature into the world. And we, by union with him, joining in his death, burial, and resurrection, get enthroned. I love this old hymn that says, "You have raised our human nature to the throne at God's right hand. There we sit in glory, in splendor. There with him in glory we stand." And it's just this beautiful thing that, wow, we have been raised. It doesn't look like it right now. We are withering away in our bodies, but metaphysically, we are joined to the Son of Man who's enthroned and ascended to God's right hand and will get to participate in his rule forever. We will reign with him on the earth, not we will go to be with him in heaven forever. We will reign with him on the earth. That's the hope of the gospel.
Yep. Yes. And yes, it's a really beautiful thing. And so that is part of what you get to sample in this little book here. So
chapter 17 is just full of poetry. I just love the way that they celebrate Meldal and all his wonderful work. So just if nothing else, read Torrin Tinadrill and the Oyars of Malacandra and Perelandra and Ransom's dialogue about Meldal the Young and his father and the third one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like reading like Psalm, like, 146, 47, 48, the last few Psalms that are just sheer like praises. And I mean, in the Orthodox services, like those praises are read like every matins, like every morning service, we will read through these praises that are just recounting, here's all of these amazing things about God. And so this is kind of where they end in this book too. They're just like, wow, here's all of these amazing things about Meldal. And wow, we get to be here. So blessed be he.
Blessed be he.
Indeed. Super good. So, well, you've got a time frame because we still live in time, and so do I. So we will have to part from you, dear listener, for now. But once again, Russo, if a listener wants to find you online or in the world or in deep space, in deep heaven.
Yeah, I'm always in deep heaven in my mind. But check out questercommunity.com. That's the best place to go. Find some more of the creative things that we try to do to make the world a little more beautiful.
Okay. And I can be found at patreon.com/MosesBernabe. The Word and Journey shows up on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And you can also, I'll put this in the chat. My email is mosesmichaelreese@gmail.com. And I love making new friends. So anyway, not too well. For you, it'll probably be like next in the queue, but we will read That Hideous Strength, book 3 of this. And I've only read that once a long time ago. It was really creepy. So now that I am grown, I'll see if I have a different experience.
Yeah, it is equally as creepy, but 10 times more prophetic of what's going on in our world right now. The worship of science, the partnership of evil with scientific. It's crazy. Looking forward to that.
Indeed. So, all right. Well,
until then, speak of me always to Meldal, as you said.
and with your spirit. All right. Love you, brother. And thank you, friends. We'll see you again soon.